Good afternoon. Welcome to another family engagement session. I'm Mara Grujanek, Family Engagement Coordinator for Stevenson High School. And today we're going to be talking about social awareness. What is it? And why is it important for students to be socially aware? How does it look at Stevenson High School? And what can you, as the adult in your teen's life, do to help them sort of think about being socially aware and develop some of those skills? So without further ado, social awareness is a lot of things. It's about perspective taking and empathy, appreciating diversity and respect for others. It's the ability to take the perspective of someone else and empathize with them, including those people from backgrounds that are different than yours, and how to understand social and ethical norms so that you can behave appropriately. And to recognize where in your community you can go for support in these norms. Social awareness is one of the 5 competencies of social emotional learning that are worked on at Stevenson High School. They're literally worked on in classrooms so that students work on each of the facets of social awareness in their classrooms as they're working with the extraordinarily diverse set of students that we host and we include as part of our community at Stevenson High School. So one of the first parts of social awareness is perspective taking. So can I see things as someone else might see them, their likes, their dislikes, their feelings? Can I take myself out of where I am and put myself into your shoes and perceive things from your point of view? That's really, really important when students are working in groups to maybe frame something, think about how am I going to tackle a problem? How are we discussing what we just read or what's going on in class, or even just sitting down with their friends and talking through the day's events, right? One of the other things that is super important is empathy. So can I understand or appreciate what you are experiencing, framing from your reference points, right? Can I put myself in your perspective? That's really important when we have a very, very diverse group of students that are in our school and learning differently, or even in your social community. Can you, as a person, try to understand where someone else is just coming from? And can you have the empathy and the ability to connect with them to say, I may not agree with what you're saying, or I may not understand it, but I am trying to get better acquainted with how you feel. Help me understand how you feel from your perspective, even if it's not something that is from my perspective or within my wheelhouse. So first would be perspective taking. Second would be empathy. The next part is appreciating diversity. So appreciating that everyone comes from a different area. Everyone has their own unique experiences and individual differences that make them different from everybody else, irrespective of any other thing that you may think we're all the same, or you may think, well, we're all similar, that there's still diversity in everyone. And we should be able to sit back and appreciate what makes everybody unique and the strengths that each of those people bring to a community, especially a learning community, the richness that diversity brings to a learning community. And then from that, right, when I can take your perspective, when I can empathize with you, when I can appreciate the fact that you are diverse from me and understand the richness of that, then I will have respect for you, because I will respect who you are, even if you're different from what I have, even if you feel differently than I do, even if your experiences are different than mine. I will have respect for your perspective, your journey, your learning path, and then in turn, the respect becomes reciprocal. It becomes something that I give you and you give me back. So self-aware, social awareness at Stevenson and for a teen is, can I take your perspective? Can I empathize with you? Can I appreciate the diversity that you bring to the situation? And can I have respect for you? It's Stevenson that is intentional. We are intentionally to make sure that everybody feels a sense of belonging at Stevenson and understands that they are wanted, and we want them to be here. We want everybody to grow to the best potential that they can. So what can you do at home to support social awareness? You see on this slide the CASTLE competencies. The 5 CASTLE competencies, the core of social emotional learning, is self-awareness, self-management, responsible decision-making, relationship skills, and social awareness. You'll see that in schools, this is taught in the classroom, intentionally in the classroom. It is pervasive throughout the culture of the school, right? But it's also supported by home and community. And so how can you support that? Very easily. Well, intentionally, thoughtfully, the same way it's done here at school, but throughout the course of the day, right? So like when you're watching the news with your teen and things are happening in the news, and you know how they always have like, or frequently they'll have like the person that the newscaster interviews to say like, well, how are you feeling? Maybe it's they won the game, or maybe it's a house flooded, or whatever it is. It's like the person on the street that they're interviewing. What you can do is easily, if you're not sure if your student is or your teen is able to read someone else's emotions, ask them, how do you think that person is feeling? Like, why are they reacting that way? How would you react? What do you think a reaction might be? How do you think they're feeling? How do you think they might feel in a day? To be able to label emotions, to label what makes you think that they're feeling happy, or why do you think they're so excited? Or wow, they look really emotional. What do you think they're feeling? Because what happens is when your teen can label someone else's emotion, what they're doing is they're going outside of themselves, right? They're watching the news, so they should be kind of in a neutral space, but they're trying to figure out, how do they feel? What's their perspective on it? And why would I think they're feeling that, given the situation that they're in? Because it's not the same situation that your teen is in. It's a really good practice, a really good way to practice identifying emotions in someone else. Another thing is that when you are feeling your own emotions, oftentimes as adults and in teens or kids' lives, we keep our emotions sort of hidden, right? We are just sort of the constant in front of them. But sometimes it's good, especially for a teen, to label your own emotions, label your frustration, label if you work outside the home or you had a hard day, label them, let them know, oh, I'm feeling really frustrated. I may be short with you. Because what you're doing is you're allowing your teen to understand then, how do I interact with other people who may be clearly having a hard day, or who may walk into class or eventually the workplace and they look like they've been crying, or they look like they're not in a good way. Does the person who's observing that person just walk away from them, or do they say, hey, it looks like you're having a really hard day, can I help you? And it's that social awareness that you can help start to build in the home with your teens, that will help them then when they come to school and they're with their peers. It will also help them as they're in the workplace, right? When conflict arises, you can ask your teen, like if they come home and they say, wow, I really don't like this person. We had a really bad day. Well, we know that our teens are so focused on their peers and their emotions are sometimes can be extreme. So, oh, I really don't like this person, or oh, this person's this way, or whatever. But sometimes it's really a good idea for you as the adult in your teen's life to ask, how do you think that person may feel about that? That is not to discount the fact that they may be annoying your teen. That's not to discount that. Your teen gets to feel however they want to feel. But to give to in that moment when they're feeling a little bit of frustration or anger or anxiety around how their peer may be feeling, or their friend or another family member, it's a really good idea to ask them to try to take the other person's perspective and be like, gee, how do you think they're feeling about that? Because they're going to need to be able to do that as they work in the world. And if they work in a situation that's high stress or moves along quickly, they're going to be able to have that flexibility and those habits of mind to be able to say, how does that person feel? How might they be reacting to that? How may they may be, what's their perspective on this? And how can then I interact with them in the state that they're in, right? So these 4 years at Stevenson is a really good time, because social emotional learning is so embedded into our culture. It's a really good time for you to reinforce that and to have those conversations at home. Another thing is, if you have someone that's in your family or in your neighborhood, or a friend who's going through a hard time, really a good idea for you to sit down with your teen and say, hey, what can we do for this person? You know, sometimes in certain cultures, if someone's going through a hard time, the people around them feed them. I happen to be from an Eastern European background, and we feed everyone all the time. Oh, you're coming to my house? Here, have something to eat. Oh, something happened that's bad? Here, have something to eat. Oh, something happened good? Here, have something to eat. We're constantly feeding people. But to be explicit about that custom or that tradition with your teen not only allows them to really respect the values that are in your house and are in your culture, but it also helps them think about, well, why are we doing this for this person? How are they feeling? And how are we interacting with them to be supportive socially, respectful of them, have empathy for them, and show our concern or our happiness or whatever it is for the other person. So the last point that you can do is you can talk about people's body language. So that's not, I'm walking in and I'm crying my eyes out, or I'm coming in and I'm throwing my book bag down. That is this, sitting there with your arms crossed and, looking like this, or my favorite thing that my teens used to do, rolling the eyes. Probably not in the heat of the moment, but what message do you want to be sending me if you're rolling your eyes? What message do you want me to take? Is that a good time? Maybe not to say, don't you roll your eyes at me, but it may be later, hey, when you roll your eyes, is that a signal for me to step away because I'm reading it as I'm really annoying to you? But this is what it does for me too. That really gets me. It really makes me angry. So that, like if they're sarcastic, or they say one thing like, oh yeah, sure, I'd love to do that. Like, oh, do you want to take out the garbage? Sure, I can't wait. That sort of sarcasm. Talk to your teen about that, because if they really don't know sarcasm or they can't pinpoint that, they may find themselves in a situation where someone is sarcastic with them or uses figurative language or something like that, it's tough for them. And they don't know, but they said they would, but they really meant they wouldn't. So that's another good way to kind of talk about social awareness at home. So watch the news, talk about how people feel, ask them to read their own emotions, you talk about your own emotions, talk about what other, any kind of cultural or traditions or ways that you interact with people and why you do it. And then talk about those like nonverbal cues with your teen. And those are ways that you could support social awareness at home. I want to thank you very much for being with me today. Tomorrow, we're going to talk about supporting our teens' relationships with friends, with teachers, with neighbors, within our family. Our teens are going through so much emotionally and they're growing so fast. Remember, we always talk about the fact that our teens are growing as much, their brains are developing as much in adolescence as they did when they were infants. So imagine when your brain is just moving around so much. And in high school, that's what they call middle adolescence. There's just a lot to navigate. And how can you, as the adult in their life, help them navigate those relationships with their peers, with adults, with small children within the family? We'll talk about that tomorrow at noon again. I want to thank you very much for joining me today. I appreciate your time. I hope you have a great Tuesday and take care, everyone. Bye-bye.